Welcome to The Explainer. We are so glad you're here. Today, we're unpacking a genuinely fascinating perspective on a daily habit, one that, honestly, most of us engage in without a second thought. We're going to explore the teachings and writings of Shui Feng, the guide of Life Chan Yuan. Now, Shui Feng presents a really detailed philosophical framework that completely challenges how we interact with the people closest to us. Specifically, we're zeroing in on one highly destructive habit that might just be quietly sabotaging your relationships and your peace of mind right this very minute.
Okay, let's dive into this. Shui Feng centers his entire philosophy here on a really striking premise. Complaint is a poisonous arrow. What's so interesting about this is the vivid metaphor it sets up. He draws a sharp, distinct contrast between two very toxic emotions, jealousy and complaining. In his writings, he explains that, if jealousy is a poison that you swallow, something that just hurts and corrupts you from the inside, then a complaint is a poisonous arrow that you shoot directly at someone else. It's an active outward strike. We so often think of complaining as just, venting, right? A harmless way of blowing off steam. But this framework forces us to step back and look at it as a literal weapon drawn against another person.
So how exactly does Shui Feng clinically define this weapon? He states that complaint is unleashing dissatisfaction explicitly or implicitly upon others when things do not go as expected or imagined. I want you to notice those crucial last few words there, when things do not go as expected. According to the Life Chan Yuan teachings, this entire destructive behavior is triggered simply because reality didn't perfectly match our personal imagination. Instead of just accepting the reality of the situation, we get incredibly uncomfortable. And what do we do with that discomfort? We misdirect our grievances and our anger, launching them at whoever we decide is the cause of our dissatisfaction. It's basically a defense mechanism for dealing with our own unmet expectations by making someone else pay for them.
Now, we have to talk about who actually gets hit by these arrows. The blast radius of complaining is just devastating. It targets husbands and wives, colleagues and partners, superiors and subordinates, parents and children, sisters and brothers, and even our neighbors. The text emphasizes that complaints are literally one of the major causes for tension, conflicts, ruined relations, and even violent fights in all of these spheres. Just think about it. We are firing these poisonous arrows directly at the people who form the vital support structure of our entire lives. Instead of building these precious relationships up, complaining actively and systematically tears them to shreds.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer damage done on the receiving end. The text deeply explores this, comparing a healthy mind to someone who is a chronic target of complaints. Life Chan Yuan describes a complaint as the direct maltreatment of others' spirit and soul. Interestingly, it points out that the more civilized and better educated a person is, the more deeply they are hurt by this psychological battery. A person constantly on the receiving end simply cannot live a life of their own style. They develop a distorted and abnormal mentality. They experience inexplicable loss of temper, a total loss of confidence in the future, dejection, and desperation. In severe cases, the text even links this constant spiritual maltreatment to suicide. It is so incredibly far from being just harmless nagging.
Let's make this super concrete for a second. We have all heard, or let's be honest, perhaps shot these arrows before. Take this phrase, "Why are you always so irrational?" This is a direct example from Shui Feng's list of everyday complaints. It's a quick, sharp jab that instantly puts the other person on the defensive. It completely dismisses their perspective and subtly elevates the complainer as the sole, ultimate voice of reason and logic.
Or how about this common jab? I have told you again and again, but you would never listen. Now, the pacing of these kinds of comments is usually really quick, fired off in a heated moment of sheer frustration. But the source material asks us to pause here. We need to recognize these not as normal, acceptable communication, but as literal forms of spiritual maltreatment. By saying this, you are actively telling the person they are fundamentally flawed and just stubbornly ignorant.
And let's look at one more heavily relatable quote from the text. Why can't you draw lessons from past mistakes? You are making the same mistakes again and again. Have you said this? Has this been said to you? Shui Feng points out that these comments, along with others like, "Can you let me alone and have some peace?" or "It's all your fault," are nothing more than destructive complaints that are just masquerading as constructive criticism.
So I have to ask you directly, do these sound familiar? The teachings stress that this endless babbling, nagging, and complaining casts a really dark shadow over families. It severely affects the physical and spiritual well-being of everyone in the household, but it has a particularly adverse toxic effect on children. In fact, the text explicitly states that complaints are the greatest cause for a family member deciding to run away from home. The environment simply becomes way too spiritually agonizing to endure any longer.
Now, why do we actually do this?
Well, there is a stark contrast between what we'll call the complainer's delusion and reality. When we complain, we almost always believe we're in reason, that we are in the right, and that we are simply wiser than the other person. But look at Xu Feng's reality. Actually, the text argues it's just bladder wit, or hindsight. It is deeply selfish. The complainer is just shifting all the blame onto the other person solely to ensure their own peace of mind. Xu Feng states that those who complain are born with the deficiency of a heart of mercy. Wow. It's a harsh truth to swallow, for sure, but a totally necessary one if we want to understand the true root cause of why we shoot these arrows.
Okay, let's shift our perspective for a moment to the broader purpose of life according to these teachings. The goal is to attain joy, happiness, freedom, and blessing. Xu Feng asks a very logical, grounding question here. Can complaining actually bring you joy and happiness? Does constantly raking up the past, unless you actively want to punish and maltreat someone, help you achieve freedom or blessing? The clear answer is no, absolutely not. By complaining, you are actively working against the very purpose of your own life.
This idea extends directly into the broader spiritual goals of Life Qingyuan, which identifies 3 spiritual destinations: the 1,000-year world, the 10,000-year world, and the celestial island continent. In the context of these teachings, these represent the paradise or the heavenly kingdom, and the text is completely unequivocal here. There is absolutely no complaining in these places. For those engaged in self-cultivation, wishing to reach these destinations, they must completely eliminate jealousy and complaining. If you don't cultivate away these traits, entry to the heavenly kingdom is simply impossible.
To help cultivate this habit away, Xu Feng offers a really beautiful philosophical reframing: the solitary traveler. The text explains that every single human being is, ultimately, a solitary traveler on the journey of life. Because of this, everyone must bear the consequences for everything they do. Blaming others is completely unreasonable. Instead of complaining when someone doesn't meet our exact expectations, we should look at them and realize how wonderful it is to just have someone accompany us on this solitary journey at all.
So the crucial point is, how do we stop firing these arrows? The text outlines a path to a complaint-free life in 3 incredibly practical steps. Step 1. Practice mutual understanding of difficulties. Recognize that everyone has strengths and weaknesses. What is as easy as turning over a hand for you might be incredibly difficult for someone else whose spirit is willing but flesh is weak. Step 2. Break company peacefully if incompatible. If a husband and wife, for example, just cannot see eye to eye, the text actually advises letting each other go their own way rather than subjecting each other to daily spiritual torture. And step 3. Treat life as a joyful game. Xu Feng reminds us that if a play is ruined or things are screwed up, it simply doesn't matter. Life itself is a game. As long as you are joyful, it doesn't matter if the sky falls or the earth opens.
Which brings us to a truly profound thought to leave you with. A happy and joyful person has only one reason to be happy, but an unhappy and depressed person may have thousands of reasons to be unhappy. I really want you to let that sink in. The unhappy person is constantly scanning their environment, finding thousands of reasons, thousands of targets, to shoot their poisonous arrows of complaint at. The happy person simply chooses joy. So as we wrap up this explainer on the teachings of Life Qingyuan, I leave you with this question. Will you continue to search for thousands of reasons to shoot poisonous arrows, or will you choose the one reason to be happy?